In this video, we're going to pose a little puzzle for you. And as you think your way through this, it's going to give you some insight into some foundational ideas we will use when we start exploring what decimal really represents. Um, we've addressed some of this in our numeration issues where we talked about how powers of 10 can work on both sides of the decimal point. But in this particular example, we are going to be exploring what happens with a repeating decimal. These are important parts of our fraction understanding as well. For example, 1/3, when reflected as a decimal, is 0.333, where the 3 is repeated forever. We addressed this initially when we talked about our division by 9, and I gave you a check in terms of how you can tell whether or not your answer was correct. Let's take a look at that, and I'll pose a problem for you after we've reviewed this particular spreadsheet. This is the spreadsheet that we originally looked at, and we said that when we're dividing by 9 and we wanted to check whether we were correct or not, we could use our calculator. And in particular, when we think what it means, if we had a remainder of 1, that means that we would be dividing that into 9 equal parts. That's what we would be trying to do if we were to continue that division. And if you continue that division and express the results as a decimal, you would get 0.111 repeated forever. And in a like fashion, 2 divided by 9, continuing the division, would give 0.222 repeated forever, and so on. I purposefully stopped this spreadsheet at 8. And the rationale at that point was, well, if you have 9, that's the number you've got, because 9 will go into it and you won't have any remainders at all. But there's a bit of a question here that could still be asked. In particular, what should be next? And what I mean by that is if we were to take 9 and divide it by 9, well, what should come next? And our initial response, which I'm going to be calling Team Green right now, is to say, well, 9 divided by 9 is just equal to 1. Again, perfectly logical, something that goes along with our common experience, but there's an or here. And let's think about what it also could be. Just building on the pattern that we've seen, where we've seen that 8 is 0.8 repeated forever, 7 is 0.7 repeated forever, and so on, it would make perfect sense to ask ourselves, well, okay, 9 should be 0.9 repeated forever. So we've got these two possibilities here. 9 divided by 9 is either 1, or it's 0.9 repeated forever, and they both could be defended from one form or another. So in your discussion, I want you to first make up your mind whether you are going to go for Team Green or Team Blue here in terms of what you think the remainder of 9 should give you. Is it going to be 1? 9 divided by 9 giving you 1, or do you think 9 divided by 9 is going to be 0.9 repeated forever? Now, this raises a parallel question, and that is, well, if they're not the same thing, and they certainly look they're not, just to look at them, that means one would be larger than the other. And so that's the second part of the question I'm going to be asking you to pose in your discussion. The first part is, are you Team Green or Team Blue? Do you think it's 1, or do you think it's 0.9 repeated forever? The second is, well, okay, which of these two representations is larger? We're going to be using this to explore decimal, some understandings around decimal, and some interpretations in terms of what we can represent and what those representations mean.